So I've been doing some previous guides for phase two, hunter, priest, warrior, and I've been thinking about which one to do next. But while doing so, I started thinking about what kind of raid comps are we going to be seeing in Gnomeregon for phase two? Because classes are going to be getting to the end of their talent trees, we're going to be getting new runes, casters will get new spell ranks, and it'll be completely different than phase one, hopefully, because that would be more interesting. And we also don't know if it's going to be a 20-man raid or a 10-man raid. So I thought it'd be really fun, for me at least, to make two compositions for the raid that would look ideal based on what the bosses are and what runes I think we're going to have, as well as just general power ranking of classes at that level. So first, let's start with our 10-man raid, and let's start with the physical damage dealer side first. So no matter what, for physical damage side, we're going to want Wind Fury. So if you're Horde, we're going to be building this comp more so for Alliance. I'm sorry, I play Alliance. But if you're Horde, you can probably swap it in an Enhancement Shaman if you choose to. But for now, we're going to bring two Feral Druids because it's Alliance's only access to Wind Fury. For our tank, we are going to be bringing a Protection Paladin because a lot of Gnomeregon is AoE, as well as one of the main factors of why we are bringing Protection Paladin is we can't do a Warlock tank, which is really good for a single target, because if we look at mechanical mobs are not only immune to bleed and poison effects, which screws over rogues and warriors, but they're also immune to draining abilities. So the main sustain spell for Warlock tanking is not available unless Blizzard decides to add a rune, a utility rune, for Warlocks or change Metamorphosis to allow them to drain life mechanical mobs. So you will probably not be seeing Warlock tanks next phase unless they make that change. Feral Druids are not the best at tanking, so you can, but Protection Paladin just does better than every other tank right now. The only other option I could see would be Protection Warrior if it gets Spell Reflect as a rune. Otherwise, Prop Paladin all the way. Next, you may have heard about it already, but we're just going to add up in now. We're going to add in our 3 warriors because warriors are just going to be that good next phase. Because we're Alliance, I'm going to be giving us another Rep Paladin so we can have another Blessing as well as another Aura for our groups. To round out these melee, we're going to give them some Marksmanship Hunters so they can get some True Shot Auras, and just so we have a place to put our Hunters. And I assume you probably have a Rogue, and as I mentioned here, half the raid kind of screws over rogues. So we're probably only gonna bring one if we need to, because I assume you probably have a rogue in your comp, and so you gotta bring a rogue. So there's your spot rogues, but you're kind of screwed over unless Blizzard does something to help you, especially with your current build that you're running. That's all about Envenom and Deadly Brew. It's not gonna work on half the raid and most of the trash. So good luck, rogues. For the caster side of our 20-man comp, for our healers, first, we're going to be doing 2 Disc Priests, a Resto Druid, an Arcane Mage. The reason we are doing this, Disc Priests are just really good. They were brought to BFD because of their Dispel, as well as their really low cost, really good healing spells in Prayer of Mending and Penance. And half of that doesn't change because while you're not going to be the only person with a Dispel, and your Dispel isn't really necessary for this raid, you more want Poison Dispels for the second boss in Vicious Fallout, which is going to be brought by our Resto Druid and our Paladins. You do still have Penance and Prayer of Mending, which are just insane healing spells. So we're going to be bringing 2 of you. Arcane does damage and heals at the same time, and both of them are literally looking pretty decent. So we're gonna bring you as well. In our Resto Druid, we have Wild Growth, which is doing a ton of damage. We have Wrath, which is completely free of cost. And you're also getting access to Innervate and Tranquility at level 40, which is really good. So these are going to be our 4 healers. As I forgot to mention though, real quick, Discipline at level 40 also gets Power Infusion. So as we go to our casters, we're actually going to bring an Arcane Mage because we want to Power Infuse that. Also, we're going to be bringing 2 Shadow Priests because at 40 we get Shadow Form and a lot of other talents on our way to 40. But personally, I think a rune that Shadow Priests are going to be getting is Vampiric Touch, which is not only a damage ability as a dot, but also, if we get the TBC version, will give the entire party mana equal to 5% of our shadow damage that we deal. So, if we get that, I think Shadow Priests will be really good, and you're probably going to bring 1 or 2 of them. Because you're going to want 1 for your caster party and 1 for your healers, so they do not run out of mana. We're going to be bringing 2 Warlocks for both curses, and we're going to round it out with the Balanced Druid for spell crit from Moonkin. So, this is what it's going to look like for a 20-man, in my personal opinion, for an ideal comp, based on the bosses in the raid, as 3 of them are mechanical, and they're all towards the end of the raid. We don't know if they're going to move the locations of them in the order of them in the raid as they did with BFD, but more than likely, based on where they're in the raid, it's probably going to be around this order, because Gnomeregon is decently linear, but it's also more towards the end, decently linear, not towards the beginning. So if we see any mix-ups, I see it more so being Grubus and Vicious Fallout maybe mixed up, and if they add another boss. But the later half of the raid is going to be mechanical, which are going to be probably the harder ones. So for our 10-man comp, for our melee group, our physical damage group, we're going to be adding in a Feral Druid. For our Wind Fury, obviously as Horde, you can add in your Enhancement Shamans. We are going to be bringing 2 Fury Warriors. If you don't have another warrior, or you have a rogue that you have to bring because they decided to play rogue, you can substitute a warrior for rogue, because I'd feel bad for the rogue that would have to completely reroll. But ideally, you're going to be bringing 2 rogues. We're going to bring our Marksmanship Hunter into this group, and we're going to round it out with our Protection Paladin tank, just like we did for the 20-man. For how the groups are ordered for this 10-man, by the way, this is our backup, like any additional options, and this is like the main group, and then for caster group, it's going to be group 7, and any backups for them is going to be group 8. For our caster group, we're going to bring our Shadow Priest, we're going to bring our Warlock, we're only going to get 1 of them for this group. We're going to be bringing our BM Hunter, because we have a lot of Hunters from Phase 1, and they do pretty good damage at level 40 as well. So they're going to be a lot of our damage healers with our Fury Warriors. And for our healers, we're going to be bringing a Disc Priest and an Arcane Mage. Now, depending on how bad the poison dispels are for the raid, for our 20-man group, we have more than enough poison dispels with 4 druids and 2 paladins. However, currently in our 10-man group, we have 2 poison dispels. So if poisons are bad, you have the option of swapping out the Arcane Mage for either a Holy Paladin or a Resto Druid, because they can dispel. Preferably, probably the Resto Druid, just because they're just genuinely doing better, but you can also do a Holy Paladin, as then you will have 2 blessings to give your raid. Obviously for Horde, you have Shamans, but I don't know too much about Shamans, so like I said, we're building this for Alliance. So, if you have any disagreements with this, let me know in the comments. We spent a couple hours really thinking about this with my guild, and this is what we ended up with, based on the assumptions that mostly Shadow Priests would be getting Vampiric Touch. Again, for tanks, if warriors get a spell reflect, they actually might be better than a prop paladin, just because of a lot of these bosses I see being able to be spell reflected against. But if that doesn't happen, prop paladin will definitely be the best tank of the phase just due to the nature of the raid in comparison to every other tank, as well as Warlock tanks not being able to actually be able to tank, Rogues kind of being screwed over the entire phase because they can't do bleeds or poisons. You might think, well, warriors are currently doing deep wounds. The reason we put Fury Warrior is because deep wounds is for arms. At level 40, they changed to the Fury spec so that they wouldn't be doing bleeds, which is why we're still bringing a ton of warriors. So, if you have anything you disagree with or anything you want to note on, leave it in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for what specs you want to see pre-bis guide for next, also leave them in the comments below. And thank you for watching.